Hi, I'm Emma Drabble. It's a really lovely pleasure to be asked to join you for the photo show talks. Some of you might have seen and met me before. I see quite a lot of you, I think, through the camera clubs, and it's lovely to see people face to face. But sadly, we're in this frame today, so hopefully, I can just do, or at least tell you the work I've been doing this year, because I know a few different people have been following me year on year. So I've always got something new or new projects to share. So today's talk is called Beyond the Obvious, and those that don't know me already, I'm a commercial and commission photographer. So I've been working all my life in photography, telling stories essentially with cameras. And, cameras, have gone from film, they've gone smaller, now they've gone bigger into full frame, and now they're going smaller again. But all these things, it's all about, how we can engage and how we can do the best job we can to tell the best stories. So with my job, it's all about telling the story, telling the right story. And hopefully through the photography I'm going to show you today, some of you might have seen some images that I've done in the past, because it just refreshes people who haven't met me before, but it will refresh. It certainly show you kind of what I do, because it's so mixed. And then also kind of to the new work that I'm doing. And have been doing and going on to do. So let's carry on. I think there's a lot of other things, other engagements that go on when we take pictures and when we tell stories. And very quickly, that's the gift of the photographer, to dip into those lives and immerse ourselves in those lives. And really, as I said, go beyond the obvious. So let's continue. So my background is in storytelling. So a typical event like this would be where for a newspaper article, I would turn up and literally tell the story across a spread of images. And again, different challenges in there, shooting at night. This was shot on a Micro Four Thirds camera, so there's obvious issues with low light. But again, I don't think that anybody should fear having a Micro Four Thirds camera and shooting bigger projects with that, because inevitably, actually, these cameras and the technology, they do handle far more than what we expect them to. So, bigger projects, this was shot with a G9. And this is a campaign shot for Morrison supermarket, Meet the Farmer campaign. And again, beautiful isolated portrait taken on the G9 with the Noxcron. Everybody loves the Noxcron 42.5 lens. And again, this is it hanging full size up in Morrison's. The kit that I use, I know I'm an Lumix ambassador, but I chose this kit to use because actually it's a good size kit. The lenses are not overly expensive, and if you're working day in, day out, you need reliable kit, reliable tones, and just to know that when I pull a camera out of the bag, that actually when I see that picture, when I see that moment, I want it delivered straight to my eye. This food work that I shoot as well, probably that's the most photoshopping I do, possibly. This was shot for a L'Oreal colour campaign. I always like to push the edges of things, so to be pushing skin tones right back. These things are all personal choice and choice when I'm working, and I really enjoy, pushing the boundaries of photography. So the studio, if in any case, probably gives me that chance to really push the edges of my photography in a very controlled way, whereas possibly out in the field, and obviously on the pressure of the job, I'm possibly not that brave to over push. We'll see later on when we see my documentary work. And then you can see again pushing the edges in. So again with this portrait, I just love the lines, and I think if you're working white on white, it gives you a little more of a simpler image. Play with a simpler element. So in this case, it's the hair flowing down and kind of using the shape of the cheek and the jawline going down, and again very simple tones. So again, similar with this one, where you just got the arm coming in the bottom there. Just very gentle toning through the white there. And again, maybe in some photography studio conventions, this is like a bit too far off what would be okay. But for me, I just enjoy playing with that and using that sort of lighting. Again, this is done with a Lumix G9. Again, Noxcron lens, very favourite one for me. So this was one done this year, which again, we bought in a baseboard. And I've seen like other photographers using this. I think Richard Avendon used a lot of table boards, baseboards. And if anything, I haven't, if this year you see, look, I haven't pushed those skin tones back as far as I possibly would have done. But, you know, I like the shape. I just do like the shape of a board underneath. And I think, you know, I'm going to pursue that. I haven't had the chance to do any more studio work this year. So this was a project called River Voices, which I know I've briefly touched on with other people that have seen me, but it's just to introduce the new people that may or not have seen my work before. So this is a project of about 20 portraits who I've photographed of lives that live and work along the river. So this is a sort of documentary work that I do, documentary portraits on location. And, you know, I find this sort of work absolutely fascinating, you know, where I'm asked to meet a person effectively blind. I don't know anything about them when I turn up. And really, it's kind of the first impressions, the connection, the first connection kind of portraits. But this was made into a book called River Voices. And this gentleman here called George, when I first met him, and I walked into his house, there's literally possibly the head of every animal bar of humans on the wall of his house. So he protects the river, but clearly he also does a bit of shooting, and he also has a hand in a bit of taxidermy as well. So he's such a character. So when I went into his house, the first thing that I tend to try and do, I always certainly observe a boot room as I walk in, and I always kind of see how the house is laid out really through the boot room. It's quite a nice sort of sub-portrait to do. And here you can see all George's boots lined up on the top shelf, and then lower down in the bottom left-hand corner, you can see his wife's shoes lined up there too. It gives you some idea of the organisation of the house. And certainly kind of when you walk around the house, you know, you do feel this sort of dominance of George's livelihood in particular. And I kind of wanted to kind of illustrate that in the portrait. So, you know, so this was taken with I think it's possibly a 7 to 14 millimeter Lumix lens on the G9 again. He got up to him to sort of show me the way out, if I'm honest. And then I just kind of said, actually, George, I'm not quite sure I've got the picture that I'm after. And then he turned around and he just kind of did this pose. And to be honest, it sums up my meeting of George completely, and also is a good reflection of who he is. So I think in portraiture, it's really interesting to kind of stick by your feeling of who somebody is, this person is when you meet them, the way that we want to introduce that person through the lens and back out the other side, you know, to the viewer. And I think, if anything, I just want to make sure with my work that I tell that story with integrity, and I really show who that person is. If there's a chance to tell the exact story, then I think we should. For me, again, that's in portraiture. It's about passing that knowledge and that pride and that feeling that person has back through the lens to the viewer and beyond. And she obviously loves that portrait. She's called Janet Preedy. You know, and just to mention light, you know, in almost every house, there's always going to be a window, and there's also going to be a window light. So, you know, I tend to really try and not use flash if I can get away with not using flash, particularly in documentary. I just think it has a much more natural, as you find it, as you find people, light. And to be honest, I think most of my subjects, to be fair, including Janet, like a good nosy out the window. If possible. So it kind of lent itself to this portrait. You know, I just love the way the necklace falls one way, she looks back the other way. And of course, just keeping in a bit of the sofa as a bit of lean through to her eye line there. And of course, yellow in the foreground, touch continuity with the yellow in the background. So I think if you're using backgrounds, I mean, everybody always says if you're going to use a background, then obviously keep it as uncluttered as possible and keep it relevant. And you know, for me, relevance is in color in particular. Sometimes you just can't document, you can't help, you know, you really can't help always the background. And if actual fact, if you look at George that we've just seen with all the animal heads on the background, sometimes the background is so informative you have to use it. This portrait was taken as part of the Gwent Living Levels project, and I'll show you a little bit of that online in a minute. But again, just talking about portraiture within this. So this is very separate to River Voices. This is a project which was about photographing people who live and work under the Severn Estuary bridge. So it's the bridge that takes you from Cardiff over to Bristol and over to London. So I'm sure many of you have been over that bridge, but under that bridge is many lives. So this is funded by Gwent Living Levels. And the other one, the River Voices, was funded by Heritage Lottery. So this is portraits of all these people, as you can see, that live and work under Severn Bridge, and I worked with another photographer called Nanette Hepburn on this project too. So if I just click on one here, so this is one of mine, lovely Iris and Theobald and Ivy. As soon as I met them, the pair of them sisters, hysterical laughter the whole time. Also made some little bits of film again of of Iris and Ivy. You must look at this yourself, actually go to the website, it's quite sweet because there's so many interviews. But again, it's really worth you carrying a hybrid camera or something like that, you know, where you can just capture some video.
I'm Ivy James. I'm 94, feeling it as well. And what else really?
So you know, it captures, again, I mean, I'm all about capturing the outtakes as a photographer, but you know, if you've got your sort of hybrid camera in there, you know, you're gonna be able just to stick that on a tripod and also capture some other types of some video work as well. Of course, with some people, you don't need to take the actual portrait of their face. We kind of know that as photographers, but you know, an outtake of you know, a pigeon owner. And again, these are the fishermen under the Severn Bridge. So when you look down, when you cross the bridge, these people work in the estuary. It's a very fast-flowing estuary, so you couldn't outrun it if the tide came up. So, but when you go down there and you photograph, you know, it's much kind of, I don't know if you've ever seen those the guillemots fishermen, I think in Indonesia, and I think that's kind of what I see when I look across and I see them fishing in that river, in the estuary there. So that's kind of in my mind when I'm photographing, of kind of getting a working portrait, much like that, I suppose. And on some days, it's just still as a mill pond, you have these beautiful counter portraits and the reflections. So it's all to see, and it's also, as I said, it's a heritage fishery. So look it up and go down yourself. It's wonderful to take pictures. The same project, I think you might recognise this chap. It's David Hearn, famous photographer David Hearn. And I went to photograph him, just wonderful photographer and character. And this is my portrait of him. So this is in his bedroom. Again, just window light and a window light. If you look at all his negatives, folders and negatives behind him. Fascinating house, fascinating character, wonderful man. And going on from there, so I took a series of portraits from a gentleman project, which is called Beyond the Obvious. This is a gentleman who suffers from acute mental health challenges, I guess. And you know, what a wonderful project to be involved in. And again, as photographers, it's just the gentle sensitivity that we've got, but just to have that engagement with, you know, somebody's day-to-day challenges and do the best and try the best to tell their story back out through those eyes, back out through the lens to the viewer, and you know, and again, to tell that story that in actual fact will hopefully do so much in trying to open up the challenges of mental health. So then going on to sort of the last or final commission that I've been working on this year. Say final, I've got 3 or 4 other outstanding jobs on my plate right now. We caught coronavirus really at the very beginning, the 1st of March. And that kind of gave us, the reality of it, because some members of my family were very, very, very sick, but also clear understanding, I guess, of where we stood, and certainly where I stood as in terms of work, and really what I was capable, once I'd recovered, what I was capable of doing with or without risk, whether immunity is a thing or not. So this project I decided to call Documenting Now. Documenting Now, again, was funded by AOMB, I think I said that, but it was really capturing people's fears, feelings and hopes during the pandemic. Okay, so Documenting Now has 2 purposes. It's actually a photographic documentary as well as a video documentary.
I'm Belle and I'm 13. I have had the coronavirus. It was very painful and miserable for me. I had it for about 2 weeks, but the last week of it was just my lungs fixing. My throat hurt really bad. It was kind of worrying that some adults can't work, but people that work in stores and work in hospitals like the NHS, I think they still get paid the same. People that work at home that aren't key workers, I think they're getting paid less because they can't do as much work and their children are at home, so they have to look after them while doing their work.
And I'm 17. I think that I've had a mild form of the coronavirus. I think that I got it from my brothers because they were all ill before me. I do think it's sad that essentially that could be the last time I saw my grandma and granddad, could be one of the last times I ever see them.
I'm running the Christmas. Half of my workload, probably more, was people with coronavirus symptoms, probably end of March, early April. Now I'm hardly seeing it at all, and that's because we've locked down so effectively. But I'm seeing an awful lot of frail older people who are dying, probably of coronavirus. In our practice, obviously you have peaks and troughs. I've written a death certificate, I think, 9 times in the last 14 days, much more than usual, and I've put coronavirus suspected as either the cause or a secondary cause in all of them.
So then there was the just the sitting portraits like these, and this was a lady that was making masks, again when there wasn't enough PPE, so this lady formed a group and was making masks. I think there's loads of groups created across the country for this, so this is just a lovely portrait really of her, and feeling very overwhelmed with what seemed to be a nice idea of getting a group together and making masks, and suddenly she's overwhelmed by the request from hospitals. So, and this is the nurse working in the local doctor's surgery, new PPE to work with, very overwhelming and very difficult for her to work, as I know every single doctor and medical professional needing to work in these new conditions is finding.
Schools obviously should open when it's safe, but I think the kids that can't get the education at home due to maybe lack of devices at home, I think there should be things in place. Maybe they can claim a laptop or something, and then they give it back once the coronavirus is over. It's almost like lending a laptop or something, maybe from the school or maybe from the government.
And this amazing lady was actually met her at Black Lives Matter march and recorded her speech, actually, which was incredible. But interestingly, she's also a lead nurse for some of the nursing homes in and across Wales, and absolutely fascinating audio documentary from her. Beautiful character. So it's a total privilege to meet people, and again, I probably wouldn't have met her to include her in documenting now if it hadn't been photographing the Black Lives Matter march. So that's the kind of flavour of what I've been working on this year. I don't believe, with Corona and obviously doing documenting now, I don't believe that photography is over for us photographers. I'm not going to be pessimistic in saying that. My diary seems fortunately fairly full at the minute. So what is this? The challenges obviously is studio work, bringing people into studio spaces. And I have a studio within a building of other businesses, and the other businesses actually seem to have left. So it's foolish to say it doesn't impact, because it is impacting. But I've got a portrait session booked with a client, and straight away I was suggesting, look, and actually I've just shot a musician as well. And of course, the studio has to go on location to those clients, and we have to almost to go back to pop-up studios. I don't know if anybody else does that, but I do a pop-up studio and say, let's just take it on location. Wherever you go, there's the opportunity. In actual fact, I took a pop-up studio, and actually the location was far better than the background. So maybe there's a chance that kind of Corona just makes us broaden the edges of what we do anyway and stops us being too safe. So it's probably not a bad thing. So I know I talked a bit about the G9 and Micro Four Thirds, but actually for the Gwent Living Levels project, I used the S1R, which is this camera, big, fairly big camera, but I quite like it. I quite like the weight and the stability on that. I actually didn't use a full frame lens on that. I actually used a vintage Leica lens on that with a Nova Flex adapter, which is an L to M, and then a lot of different photographers out there are kind of using that. I really enjoyed it on my full manual. But then when I went to documenting now, very nicely, I kind of tried out some Sigma and some Lumix S, and gave myself a bit of a holiday actually from from manual, and really enjoyed the 50mm Lumix S on the S1R. As you see, if you look at the portraits, it's just so beautiful, and the tonal range is really gorgeous on those. And you know, having taken, and I know you should say, well, okay, with the S1R, because it went into Europe with it, with the S1R, I want to go into, wouldn't go on a travel tour of documenting now. Well, actually it did with the 50mm, and the Sigma 35 is just lovely as well. So really, really good lenses. And actually, I know it's as big in my hand, but I can tell you now from a Nikon or another camera's point of view, it's still quite a small lens, I think. And of course, like now, of course, they've got the S5. So, you know, I think the body goes shrinking again, I think smaller than the GH5, which I use as a film camera. And it's just amazing, you know, with the work I'm doing, the hybrid work I'm doing with audio and with video and photography. At any one time you want to tell a slightly different story, then of course you can flick onto video and have broadcast quality video and broadcast quality sound, you know, if you're using really good mic kits with these cameras. So it's, you know, when we get to location, you know, we want the choice quite quickly, or I want the choice quite quickly of whether I want to shoot film or whether I want to shoot photography. Mostly I want to shoot both, and then I've got 2 products to sell. So that's the commercial aspect of that. So from my point of view, and that's the same as audio, I know a lot of you are going into audio, but so I use a Zoom recorder for that, a separate Zoom recorder for those documenting now portraits and audio. And I found that, again, a lovely device. So it is every which way you choose. You know, whatever cameras you do choose, obviously, you know, we all choose something that works perfectly for us. And for me, the kit that I choose is just the kit that works perfectly for the way I can tell a story. Anytime I'm in front of an editing machine is any time and any time and any money lost in the wage that I'm paid or the funding I'm given to do a commission. So from my point of view, I've got to have the job done really on site and in camera if possible. And usually it is, which is good. So hopefully there's a chance to have a live with any questions. I'm sure you'll put questions or feedback in the comments below. Be kind or constructive on either, however you feel. And look forward to chatting with you should we have another photo show, and look forward to seeing you, because I've got my say favourites who I seem to see year on year, so can't wait to see you on another open show. And no doubt, I'm sure that I'm going to see you across the camera clubs, or at least online a bit further. So see you then.